Hey, wake up. Yeah. Got my man Dave, got my man Dan. You know what time it is, and this is 2-6. Yeah. Ask us, we seatbelts, boy. You better strap up. Conversations is controversy. It's time to act up. Carolina ballistics, where the precision's wicked. Tune in and listen. It get deep if you dig it. No reason to act tough. Carolina ballistics training academy. Ain't no reason to act tough. So listen up.
Hey guys, this is Dan. Sign up for classes by merch at carolinaballisticsTA.net. That's carolinaballisticsTA.net. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is going to be an incredible show we have today, guys. We have Miss Jane Elliott here at Carolina Ballistics and Training Academy. This is our show. I am Daniel Irwin. Dave, the man, the myth, the legend, Harris is doing training, so he won't be able to be with us today. Guys, I don't even know. Without any further hesitation, Miss Jane Elliott, guys. Miss Jane.
Okay.
Wow,
Yeah,
this is
it. Here she is.
Yeah.
This is all there is. There ain't no more. Okay.
Miss Jane, you are a national treasure. For the few people who don't know who you are, would you mind giving us an introduction of who you are and what has been your life goal?
Well, for the last 54 years, it'll be 55 years in April, I have been aware of and have been teaching people about the damage we do to people of all kinds by judging people on the basis of the color of their skin. I put my third graders in all white, all Christian Riceville, Iowa, through an exercise in eye color the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed.
Wow.
In 1968. And I learned more that day than my kids did because I watched my children become what I told them they were allowed to be. Blue-eyed people were on the bottom that first day. Brown-eyed people were on the top. And when I stood in front of my classroom that day, after we had discussed racism, we had discussed the ignorance of it, we had discussed the need to get over it, we had discussed what you can do about it. Then the kids, I said, would you like to find out how it feels to be something other than white in the United States of America? Well, yeah, because everything I suggested for them was fun. Yeah, let's do that. So I split them according to the color of their eyes. I put blue-eyed people on the bottom because I'm blue-eyed, and I didn't want the power structure to be with the top group that day. Brown-eyed people were on the top, and immediately, oh my God, when I think about it, I get kind of sick to my stomach.
Wow.
Little brown-eyed Debbie sitting in the front row that day, 9 years old, had never been in the presence of people of color, looked up at me and said, how come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes?
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, that's how it works. I didn't laugh.
Wow.
No, it was absolutely shocking that little 9-year-old girl could attack her teacher, who was over 30 years old, on the basis of the color of my eyes because of an exercise that I had designed to teach them about empathy.
Wow.
I couldn't believe what had happened. And then Alan Moss in the back row said, oh, Debbie, if she didn't have them blue eyes, she'd be the principal or the superintendent. They're both brown-eyed. They weren't brown-eyed.
Wow.
But he was my Uncle Tom that day. It was just terrifying.
Wow.
Yeah, it is absolutely terrifying. I've never forgotten it. I've never been able to forget it. And I still dream about it at night because the same things that I was fighting that day with that exercise in society are happening today in society and have increased over with our former president. The level of racism, ageism, homophobia, ethnocentrism, sexism have all increased in this country because it's all become more and more all right to be a fool. And so I've been teaching about that for the last 55 years. It'll be 55 years.
Wow. I think the first time that I saw that experiment conducted was on the Oprah show back in like 1992. What was it like conducting that experiment on the Oprah show?
Number one, it's not an experiment because if what I do with the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise is an experiment, and what I do is create a microcosm of society in a third grade classroom. If that's an experiment, then what we have been doing with people of color in this country for the last 300 years is an experiment, and we ought to put a stop to it. No, I
Wow.
didn't do it. I wasn't trying to learn something from those students. I was trying to teach them something. You do an experiment to learn something from what you're doing. I was
Yeah.
doing it to try to teach them to be empathetic. So it's an exercise. I knew I had a bear by the tail, but I didn't realize how ugly it could get. They called me and asked me to come to Toronto, Canada to
Hmm.
do, because they sent a film crew to my classroom. They filmed in my classroom the second time I did the exercise the following year. And they took that film to Canada and showed it to a bunch of Canadians. And I sat there while they were watching the film, and people were quite shocked. And then they had me come out and sit on the stage. And first woman, I said, "Are there any questions?" And the first person was, "How could you do that to those poor little white children?" I said, "If yeah, yeah, I get that every time." And I
Wow.
said, "If you're upset about what happened to those poor little white children at the hands of one person for a day, you must be absolutely infuriated by what happens to people of color in your country and mine." And she said,
Wow.
and I'll never forget it as long as I live, "That's different. They're used to it. They can take it."
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
That's
And I
heavy.
have heard that over and over
That's
and
heavy.
over. And I have had a so called white woman turn to the so called black woman beside her and say, "It's different for you. You're used to it. It's harder for us. We've never
Mm,
been treated that way." And I
mm,
think, how can you sit there in this exercise and use that kind of language to that woman of color and say to her, "You're used to it. You can take it." We aren't used to that kind of behavior. Did
mm,
she not realize what she was saying? And of course she didn't. And when people say to me now, "It was good enough for my father, it's good enough for me." No, it was never good enough for our fathers.
yeah.
Sexism, racism, ageism, homophobia, none of those things are good enough for any of us. We
Yeah.
have to put a stop to all of them. But we
Yeah.
use as our model for how to treat those who are different the way we treat people of color in this country.
Yeah.
If it's all
Yeah.
right to do it to African Americans, then it's all right to do it to Chinese, Japanese, people from India. Certainly, it's all right to do it to the Jews. We've done it forever.
Wow.
We have pictures, and you have
Yeah.
seen the pictures of the pale, stale males marching down the street with their tiki torches
Mm,
saying, "Jews will not replace us." Obviously, they don't realize that without Judaism, there would be no Christianity and no Muslims. The
wow.
first 5 books of the Old Testament came out of the Torah, the Jewish the Jewish manual for how to be a good Jewish person.
Wow.
So Jews will not replace us. They were here before we were. We are only here because of them.
Wow.
And the people who
Wow.
are so upset about these brown skinned people coming across the border, do they not realize that? No, they don't realize that only 15 to 18% of the population of the world is classified as white.
Wow.
Get
Wow.
over it, people. We think
Mm,
that because we're right now the numerical majority in this country, think that we're the numerical majority all over the world. We aren't.
mm,
Only 15 to 18% of the human population of the earth is classified as white.
wow.
And that's why we have all these groups of pale, stale males charging
Oh,
around
man.
saying we're on the top. No, fellas, you know you're going to be replaced. You know your numbers are fading. You know your percentages are fading. You'd better get used to being in the presence of those who are other than white. You'd better get used to being having as your boss somebody who doesn't look like you. And you'd also better get used to the idea that Jesus was not white.
You gonna send some people off the end on that one.
It's about time we realize he was an Ethiopian Jew. He had
Wow.
curly, kinky, woolly hair and feet of bronze. Now,
Mm,
this is the season of the year when we can make a big difference. Go down to the local creche, the local manger scene. Take that little doll that looks out of the Pillsbury Doughboy out of that manger and put in a black doll. And then watch the faces of people who come up and move the straw and say, "Oh, he's black."
oh,
That's right,
man.
folks. This is hey, let's change the whole thing. Let's make people aware of the lie that we have created and
Yeah.
the lie that we have been living, and how much better our lives would all be if we get over the lies.
Wow. Now, I want to take a quick detour here. Your take on race and how religion has affected our social construct. Would you mind expanding on that, on what is race and how religion has affected our perception of race?
Number one, I have a problem with things like social construct. let's just say we made up a lie
Wow.
in order for us white folks to maintain power. And we'll do whatever we have to do to maintain that power. They kicked me out of the church that I had gone to for years.
Oh,
The
man.
minister came out to, oh yeah, the minister came out to my house and said, after he had done his preliminary little remarks, and he said, could you do me a favor? I said, well, I will if I can. What would you like? And he said, could you find another place to worship on Sunday morning?
Oh,
I
man.
said, yes, that bluntly. I said, well,
Wow.
yes, I can, but why would you ask me to do that?
Yeah.
And he said, because my parishioners don't like the words you use in the service.
Wow.
I said, oh, they don't like it when I call God the mother? He said, that's right. I said, well, you need to explain to them that for me, God is a spirit and has neither color nor gender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he said, well, I understand that. And then he said, you've got a little church next door. And I do have. There's a little church next door to my house.
Mm-hmm.
And we live out in the country because it's a long story. You don't want to hear it. It's just
No,
ugly.
yeah, you good. It's very rare that I have a historical figure in my podcast, so do your thing.
Well, most people say I'm an hysterical figure, not a historical one.
Oh man, they tripping.
Yeah, words don't bother me a whole lot, but
Yeah.
When my kids were in one of my kids was in high school,
Mhm.
and one of the teachers at the high school level, whose husband
Mhm.
was the principal at the elementary level, came to me during a teachers meeting and said, Jane, you've got to get your kids out of this school. I said, why? She said, because these teachers are trying to destroy your children.
Wow.
Because of the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise, my children took all the abuse that teachers didn't dare give to me. So they took it out on my kids. So we moved.
Oh wow.
And we moved and called a real estate agent in the next town, and he said he'd help me to find a house. So I went to find a house, and he showed me the most rundown, dilapidated places you could ever imagine. And I said, is this the best house you've got for sale to buy in Osage? And he said, it's the best one for you.
Oh,
And I thought,
whoa.
yeah,
Wow.
I thought, did he say what I just thought he said?
Oh, he
So
definitely
then
said we just saw
Oh
you
yeah,
say.
yeah. So I called my husband. I said, "What do you suppose he was saying?" He said, "I don't know what the SOB was saying. Just forget it. We'll find another one." So
Wow.
the guy called me a couple of days later and said, "I found just the right house for you." I said, "Okay, where is it?" He said, "It's 6 miles from town." I said,
Wow.
"Oh, 6 miles from town. That would be far
Wow.
enough away from the
Wow.
locals." So
Wow.
I went to look at it. It was an old schoolhouse built in 1929 or something.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was lovely. So I said,
Wow. They said
I think,
get out of town. Get on and
yeah,
get.
it was just a scream, that kind of thing. So
Oh my
after that,
goodness.
we moved into that house.
Wow.
And after we did, Daryl would call me and say, and he ran a grocery store. My husband ran a grocery store for doesn't
Mhm.
matter who. And he called and said, now, Jane, if you need anything from the store, just call me and tell me what you need. And you don't have to come to town. I'll bring it home. And
Wow.
I thought, isn't that kind of him? It took me
Wow.
a long time to realize that what he was saying was, I don't want my customers to know who I'm married to.
Oh
I'll
my
bring the stuff home.
goodness.
Yes. And later on, he said, Jane, I couldn't afford to have you in the store. You know how people
Wow.
feel about you. So
Oh
it was
wow.
like, what the?
That's cold-blooded now. What in the world, man?
Well, this is what I live with. This is
Wow.
this is the story of my life.
Wow.
I will be seen
Wow.
as the town that I'm living in now, and Riceville. I'm their only N-word lover. And
Oh.
yeah, literally, she's the only N-word lover in town.
Wow.
And I say to myself,
Wow.
well, better a lover than a hater.
Hey, wow. Jesus.
See, that's a step up.
So I do want to ask you. So you've lived an incredibly full life. I have you born in 1933, right? And
Yep.
you've literally have seen America evolve to where we are right now.
No, wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Wait. Before we're going to start evolving right now. You're not going to
Okay.
call this country America anymore.
Okay.
America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. All the citizens of all those countries are Americans.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
important
True.
thing, the thing we have to call this country is the United States of America, because the
Wow.
most important word in that title is united.
Yeah.
Now, our last president for 4 years worked at dividing this country. We
Oh,
have
man.
to say the United States of America. And if you don't want to use all those syllables, say US, because that spells us. And that means
True.
all of us. So it's
True.
time to stop calling this country America.
Yeah.
America is not just the 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands off the southeastern coast of the United States. It's America is all those countries from Canada to South America. So let's call this country the U.S. or the United States of America. Now, what was your question?
We're gonna have to figure out those how that block of land's gonna be controlled. That's a lot of
Yeah, we aren't all of America. We're just the United States of America. 48 contiguous states, Alaska, Hawaii, and the islands. We need to be more precise in our language. Now, what's your question?
Yeah. So you've been around a long time.
You have to keep saying that, don't you?
Well, no, I didn't mean it like that. For a seasoned amount of time.
A seasoned amount of time. You have to remember, I was born in 1933.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year that Adolf Hitler and Franklin Roosevelt came to power in their countries.
Wow.
So for 12 years, from 1933 till 1945, I heard my father ranting about what was going on in Germany and in Europe at the hands of the Hitlerites.
Wow.
And then came our last president.
Mm-hmm.
And the words that came out of his mouth were the same words that came out of Adolf Hitler's mouth from 1933 till 1945.
Oh, wow.
And I recognized it immediately, and I said, this is Hitlerian. This man is trying to do what Hitler did. And then I said to myself, Jane, you're exaggerating. That isn't what's happening. Don't think that way about this man. That isn't what's happening. And then I read the book, When at Times the Mob is Swayed. Mm-hmm. If you haven't read it, get it and read it. And read I think it's in the first chapter. He says, in his bedside table in a locked drawer, Mr. T. Rump keeps a copy of the book, The New World Order. Wow. Which has in it the writings of Adolf Hitler.
Wow, that's wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is a wow. That is something. I read that and I thought, oh my God, I wasn't wrong. I was seeing it the way it was happening. The man is an admirer of Adolf Hitler, and no wonder he hates the Jews.
Wow. So, and particularly, from the years, from between the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and to where we are today, the fight for civil rights, how have you personally perceived its growth?
We were doing well. We really were. We were making progress. And it looked like things were getting better. And Barack Obama got elected president of the United States. And Whoopi Goldberg says, now I can put my suitcase down. I don't have to plan on leaving my country. And I thought, she's right. And I don't have to do these workshops anymore.
Yeah.
And then, because I was still naive, I didn't realize what was going to happen. What happened was the angry ones, the racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric, and anti-Semitic people went underground for 8 years and plotted on how they were going to keep Mr. Obama from being successful. And that's exactly what they did.
Wow.
And decided how they were going to change things when they got rid of that black man in the White House.
Wow.
I remember Richard Nixon saying to a group of people, I was in the group, to which he said, I'm trying to save the White House for you white people.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Yeah. This was a president of the United States. And I thought, okay, that's it. Now we've got to do something about this. We can't let that happen. Well, I wasn't doing then what I'm doing now. We need to change the name of the White House. There are lots of White Houses in Washington, D.C. I've been there. I've seen them. We need to change the name of that house to the president's residence. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
That is actually pretty good.
That makes more sense. The White House gives us the wrong impression. And this president said, I'm trying to save the White House for you white people. No, that isn't the reason that house is named the White House. We need to realize that there's a whole different background for that one. And we need to put a stop to calling the president's residence the White House, because that says only white people will be allowed to live here.
Wow. I did want to touch on something. There's an ongoing discussion about what critical race theory is. You are an educator. Could you explain this theory to us?
Number one, critical race theory for me, CRT. They say CRT isn't coming to my school. For me, CRT stands for curriculum, respecting truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely essential that we start telling the truth to students preschool to the time they graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
It's time for us to tell the truth about what we did to get this country and what we are doing to preserve it, instead
Wow.
of telling the lie.
Wow. Wow.
Critical race theory, I know the man who came up with that, and he's writing a book about me. It's going to be interesting to see what he says after he realizes that I'm saying, look, that's a
Wow.
nice idea, but it isn't what it's all about. It
Yeah.
isn't about race. It
Yeah.
isn't about race. The word race, people need to know that the word race, meaning a specific group of people, came out of France in 1580.
Wow.
Now think about that. Before 1580, the word race just meant a contest of some kind. It didn't mean a specific group of people. But in France, they came up with the idea that race, we could use race to describe a specific group of people. This isn't about race. This is about telling the truth about people of all kinds. And the first truth we have to tell is there's only one race,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that's the human race, and we're all
Yeah.
members of it. Now, if we all would trace our DNA back as far as we could, we'd find that every human being on the face of the earth has some percentage of their DNA that came from a country in Africa.
Wow.
So when people say, I don't want to be called black, well, that's too bad about that.
Wow.
You are not black, you aren't black, and I'm not white.
Wow.
You're a shade of brown, and so am I.
Wow.
You
Yeah, I
can
think.
see where my hair stops and my skin begins. I can
Yeah.
see where your hair stops and your skin begins.
Yeah.
And they aren't the same color,
Yeah.
because your hair is black and your skin's a shade of brown. My hair is white, and someday yours will be, and my skin's a shade of brown. Let's get over this nonsense by using words like white and black. That terminology came up during the Spanish Inquisition, when
Mm-hmm.
Torquemada and company were going around the world killing people in order to turn them into Catholics. And
Wow.
they had killed a bunch of Christians before they realized that you can't tell what a person's religion is by looking at them. So at that point, they decided they had to find a way to decide who deserved to die, who might be evil. So they
Mm.
set upon skin color, and light-colored people were called white, which is the color of goodness and purity, and dark-skinned people were called black, which is the color of savage and evil. And you
Wow.
look up those words in the dictionary, and that's what you'll see.
Yeah.
White is the color of goodness and purity. Black is the color of savagery and evil. So
Mm.
a little kid comes into the classroom, the ignorant teacher takes one look at him and says, oh, another little black boy. And the kid knows, I'm allowed to be savage and evil because I'm black.
Yeah. Wow.
We need to realize that words are the most powerful weapon devised by humankind. We use them to destroy people every day of our lives.
Hmm.
And you hear it happen and you think, no, not with me. People will say to me, well, I'm in a mixed marriage. We are a biracial couple. And I say, oh, really? Which of you have parents from outer space?
Mm.
Well, neither one. Well, then you aren't biracial, darling.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get over the words like biracial and multiracial, because there's only one race on the face of the earth, and that's the human race, and we are all members of it. And it's time to realize that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's
What
beautiful.
was your question? I suspect I didn't answer it. If you want a short answer question, if you want a short answer, ask a really simple question.
Yeah. What is CRT? I think that was the basic question.
Well, CRT is another lie. Number one, it isn't a theory. It's
Mhm.
time for us to stop teaching theories and teach fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact that there's only one race on the face of the earth. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
Then you don't
Yeah.
have to worry about a racial theory, because there's only one race.
Yeah.
Let's
It
start
kind of negates it all.
treating people. Yeah, let's start
Yeah.
treating people as if we're all 20th, 30th to 50th cousins, which is what we are.
Yeah.
And if we trace our ancestry back far enough, we'll find African in every one of our ancestry. So let's stop talking about race and start talking about things like religion, which has been used to promote the idea of several different races, and to promote the idea that white is right. Well, see a true picture of Jesus, and then you'll wonder why we are still believing that nonsense. It's time to stop the nonsense.
Yeah. Wow.
Critical
Wow.
curriculum respecting truth is what we need in the schools in this country today. And instead of teaching the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, only one of which begins with R, writing begins with W, and arithmetic begins with A, it's time to start teaching. Yeah, Doesn't anybody ever think of that?
That is true.
Well, yeah, of course it is. And other teacher would say to me, I teach the 3 R's. And I'd say, yeah, and I know which one you mean, but you don't spell very well, do you?
She said arithmetic is an A, fool.
Yeah, and I say that, and they, you know what I mean. That's tradition. I say, well,
Oh,
so people,
wow.
women staying at home and taking care of the house tradition, and you're
Yeah.
here in this building teaching school. So
Yeah.
you're not as traditional. You say you are.
As you
Let's
say.
give up the words, the 3 R's. But let's
Yeah.
start teaching the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility.
Yeah.
Every child and every person in that classroom has the right to expect their rights to be respected and to be held responsible. If people don't respect your rights, they are to be held responsible for failing to do so. Those 3 R's, if we would teach the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility, we would do away with most of the problems that we have in the schools and on the streets today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, abortion and people of color. Can you tie the connection? Why is it so easy, or why is it so accessible for African Americans to have abortions? I'll start off with that little portion. Go ahead.
It isn't just accessible. For years, it was the expected and accepted way to behave when a Black woman got pregnant.
Wow.
It was all right. And you need to know that. And you need to know that the reason they closed the Planned Parenthood clinics in this country is because Ben Wattenberg wrote a book called The Birth Dearth. Now, do not go out and try to buy the book The Birth Dearth, because you won't be able to find the first edition.
Wow.
In that first edition, in that first paragraph, in that first book, The Birth Dearth, Ben Wattenberg said the major problem confronting the United States today is there are not enough white babies being born.
Wow.
If we don't do something about this and do it quickly, white people will no longer be a numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. That was the first paragraph. I was furious. I thought, what in hell is he talking? How would it? So I read the next paragraph, and I figured out what it was he was doing. He said, there are 3 things we can do to solve this problem. Number 1, we can pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. However, and these are his words, not mine.
Yeah.
However, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that.
Oh, wow.
He said the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants allowed into this country. Then he said, unfortunately, the vast majority of those wanting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that.
Wow.
He says the third thing we need to do is remember that 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth.
Wow.
Now, people, you look at the president, or the person who was president 2 years ago, and realize that he built a wall on the southern border of the United States. And he said openly, in order to keep those brown-skinned people out, because brown-skinned people reproduce too rapidly.
Oh, wow.
Nobody saw that as a racist statement except me. And I thought, what in the devil are you doing? And why would anybody vote to build this wall? This country was founded. Evidently, nobody realizes that the first people who came here were not Europeans, and they were not Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was not the first person who discovered this land. This land, this continent, was discovered by people from Africa, who left the area of the equator and without any modern technology managed to populate every landmass on the face of the earth.
Wow.
Now you need to know that, and most people don't know that. They think, oh, I'm Caucasian. People, if modern human beings had started in the Caucasus mountain region, they wouldn't have lived through the first winter. Get real.
Wow.
Those people from those Caucasians came from Africa, just like all the rest of us did. It's time for us to stop celebrating Columbus Day. And when I hear about 1619, that's what we celebrate, because that's when we brought the first slaves here from Africa. Wait a minute, people. There were black people, what we call black people. They were Africans on this land long before Columbus was a gleam in his father's eye. From 20,000 to 10,000 years before Columbus was born, there were people from Africa on this continent. And the people that we call Indians, because Columbus was trying to get to India and he was lost So he called the people who were here Indians. They weren't Indians, and they aren't Indians today, and they didn't spring up out of the ground. They came from Africa just like all the rest of us did. It's time for us to start teaching the truth. This is CRT in curriculum respecting truth is happening to you right now. And these aren't theories that I'm telling you. These are facts.
Wow. Wow.
What was your question?
Yeah, you pretty much knocked that one clean out the park, Miss Elliott. And I would not have expected anything less from a civil rights legend such as yourself. And I know you don't want me to say this, but I want to say.
I'll tell you why I don't want you to call me a legend. And take that book, The Birth Dearth, off that picture. I don't want them buying that book because it doesn't do what I wanted it to do. He rewrote the book and published it again, and this time it is full of tables and graphs and charts that say what he wants to say without saying it in black and white.
Gotcha.
Benjamin Disraeli said there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. That book, as he rewrote it, is full of lies, damn lies, and statistics. And you need to realize that. So don't try to find that book. But if you can find me a copy of the first edition of that book, and I know where there is one, but they want $7,500 for it.
Of course they do.
Of course they do. And of course, nobody's going to pay that because we can't afford that. But I had 3 copies of that, and I loaned it to people, and they never brought it back. But somewhere out there are 3 of my copies with my name on them.
Oh,
wow. The first edition of The Birth Dearth. If you can't find one with that first paragraph that I described, don't buy that book.
You say it's called birth?
It's called The Birth Dearth, which means the lack of birth.
Whoever one of y'all that has that book, you better come up off it. Miss Jane Elliott wants it back.
I want my book back.
She wants her book back.
I want all 3 of them back.
We'll find you. No, I'm joking.
But see, people keep sending me the second edition. I've probably got a dozen copies of that second edition here in my home in Iowa because people say, "Oh, she needs this book," and I think, "No, this
not
isn't
again.
The one I need.
Yeah, I need the $7,500 one, not the $30 one. I need the one for $7,500.
That's right. Don't
give me this. Get this out of here.
Keep your damn book. Don't read it. Just keep it.
Man.
Use it for a doorstop.
Man.
If you can get your hands on that first one, I want that first one. I want it back. And I want to be able to hold it up in front of people and say, here's the way it is, folks. Wow. This man was a member of the American Enterprise Institute and gave advice to presidents of the United States.
Wow.
And as a result of that, we had a president for 4 years who closed the Planned Parenthood clinics, thinking that the only thing they're good for is letting white women get abortions. That's not what Planned Parenthood clinics were about.
Wow.
That's a very small portion of what they did. But he figured, evidently, that if we could stop abortions and we could have more white babies being born, well, the man's a fool, and everybody knows he's a fool. But you need to realize that your family is a picture of the future in the United States of America and all over the world. You have to realize that what you call biracial is a mosaic family. A mosaic is an art form that is new, beautiful, unique, and made of many elements. That's what your family is. And they need to be called a mosaic family instead of biracial or multiracial. That is uniting with the enemy when you use the words of racism to stop racism.
Yeah. And, me and my wife has talked about that at great length. I was telling my producer if my wife was born in another decade, she'd probably be very similar to who you are, Miss Elliott.
Too bad for you.
Yeah. But she said too bad for me. But she was really excited when I told her that we were going to have the interview with you. And she was like, Miss Jane Elliott, I gotta talk to her. And I was like, yeah, hold on, let me warm her up for a second. Let me get her warmed up first.
You have to realize that because of the hole in the ozone layer, which I understand is shrinking now, more and more sunlight had been over the years allowed to enter our environment. and hit the faces and the bodies of people like me who don't have much melanin in their skin. So we had more and more people dying of melanoma, which is a skin cancer that is the result of not having enough melanin in your body to protect your cells from the damaging rays of the sun.
Wow.
Now, you need to know that your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren have a better chance of living long lives because they have more melanin in their skin.
Wow.
It's going to become extremely important for people who want to reproduce to find someone of color with whom to reproduce so that their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will live longer. It has now become a matter of self-preservation. And people have never had to think about that before, but now we're going to have to. We have ruined the ozone layer. We are destroying this. The climate change is not a joke, and it's not a lie. It's there. It's real, and it's going to get worse instead of better. And children who look like yours are going to live a long time into the future, and so are their grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was Miss Jane Elliott. You have graced us with your presence. I personally am honored to have you on the show. This was awesome. There was a lot of nuggets you dropped for us, a lot of jewels that we can take away from this. And hopefully whomever is able to see or view this podcast, they'll be able to take something for themselves and, you know, spread some love and positivity in this world as well.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, guys, if you made it this long, you are the real one. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. This is the podcast. We are Carolina Ballistics and Training Academy, and we are